You'll want some small sockets or a screwdriver to work with the hose clamps, depending on what kind of clamps they are and how you want to approach it. You might want to replace hose clamps if you see any bad ones. There might be a zip tie you have to cut, so some side cutters would come in handy. Rubber gloves are nice to have around. And then there's rubber hose that leads to and from the fuel filter, and it can be helpful to clamp that off to minimize fuel spill. So you could use some kind of clamps like these, or you could even use a couple of pair of vice grips, although you want to protect from those teeth, maybe using a split piece of plastic tubing or something of that nature. The last thing you'll need is some kind of a pan, a metal pan or a plastic pan, because when you remove the old fuel filter, there's some spillage that's going to happen, and so having something to catch that is going to be helpful. Here are 3 different recommendations. First of all, do this job when your fuel tank is just about empty. In case something goes wrong, it would minimize the size of the spill. The second thing you can do is refer to your Bentley manual and find out which fuse controls the fuel pump, and remove that and let your motor run for a couple of seconds. It'll die out, and that might reduce the pressure to the fuel pump, to the fuel filter. And then the last thing is to make sure that the car is completely cooled off before you do this job. You wouldn't want any heat igniting fuel. You can't tell very well from this shot, but where we are is toward the front of the car, and on the driver's side. This right here is the center of the car. It's the manual transmission. There's the drain plug. And here's the front, and this is toward the rear. This is a shield that's covering the fuel filter that's right here. I've already removed a screw here. There is another attachment up this direction, and then I cut a zip tie that was there. And so I'm going to remove the 2 remaining pieces. One of them, this one's kind of a funky looking, I don't know if you call it a bolt, but it's kind of funky looking, and then this one is a hex-headed screw. So I'm going to start them with a ratchet, and actually you might want to put on your tool list a nut driver, because that will be very helpful in getting these the rest of the way off. So here you see the fuel filter, and this is a clamp. That clamp will have to be removed. There's a little nut there, and then this hose will need to be clamped, and this hose will need to be clamped. Okay, so I've clamped off this hose, and then I've removed the clamp that holds in the fuel filter. So I put a pan underneath here, and sometimes the fuel filter is a little bit sticky with the hose if it's been there for a long time. So some people recommend that you can remove the clamps and then make a very, very small cut in the hose, just a very small one, to help it maybe release from sticking on the fuel filter, but that was not the case here. So I'm going to try to take the front off first. See some fuel spilling. This car only has 78,000 miles on it, but it is 13 years old, so I replaced some of the fuel hoses. Actually, I replaced 3 of them and all the related clamps, and so you might want to do the same. It's up to you. Then the next step is to install the new fuel filter. I recommend that you first put this clamp in. There's these hooks here that go in up there. It's a lot easier to get that clamp in if you put it in first. And then when you go to put the new fuel filter in, pay attention to these directional arrows that show the travel of the fuel from the rear of the car to the front of the car. And then put the clamp in. It's really not too tough to get in. After you've put in the new fuel filter and you've tightened down the hose clamps, you might want to run the car around the block or just run the motor in the garage for a few minutes, whatever it takes to make sure that there aren't any leaks in the system. And then after that, you can put the shield back on. Because the shield on this car was old and rusty, just for a few dollars, it's getting a brand new one, nice and shiny. It just takes a minute to get it all buttoned up, maybe a few minutes, and then put a zip tie back up here and tighten everything down, and there you have it.